got 15 in the meeting, but I think we're expecting a few more.
All right, no worries. Is my hand still up?
No, but feel free to wave if you like.
All right. All right. Can't do the video thing because our network won't have it. We're running on Steam over here, I think.
Lancashire.
Yeah.
East Lancs Railway runs on Steam as well, so. I think we'll make a start, and if others join, then that's great. So good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Caroline Clark from OPSS, and I'm supporting Simon in his Meet the Regulators session as part of this BUBFA week for the Northwest. I am from the Northwest, and I think there's a few familiar names on the delegate list, which is nice. So just brief introduction from me and some housekeeping. It's for those of you that have dialed in on MS Teams, if you can mute your microphone and your video if you're not speaking. The session is being recorded as well, so we can share it more widely after the event. Any questions, please use the raise your hand facility and we'll deal with them as and when through the presentation or at the end. It is quite daunting just talking to a screen with no interaction, so interaction is very welcome. I'm sure Simon will agree. So this week has been put together by Jackie, who's your regional lead in the Northwest. It's been well attended, given obviously the pressures that everybody's under at the moment with COVID response and the pandemic and supporting business as well as your business as usual work. So we do appreciate the support that you've taken the time to attend. And it's full of events introducing better business for all and bringing regulators and business support organisations together to support local economic priorities. Throughout the first initial sessions, there's been quite a few common themes, including obviously sharing of knowledge and experience, benefits to business, collaboration, and most importantly, relationships. So obviously partnerships begin by understanding one another, and that's why these Meet the Regulator sessions have been very, very positive and well attended this week. No pressure, Simon, but the bar's been set quite high.
Oh, great, thank you for that.
No, you'll be fine. So without further ado, if anyone's got any other comments, we'll start and introduce Simon from Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. I did ask Simon for an interesting fact, and he said he hasn't got one, which I don't believe, and I threatened to make one up. So I'm sure you've got one by the end of the session, Simon. So over to you, Simon.
Great, thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. As Caroline just said there, my name's Simon Whittaker. I'm from the Fire Safety Enforcement Officer and the Primary Authority Team Lead for Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. Next slide, please. I've been in the fire service, in fact, I'll just knock my camera off because it's distracting me. Been in the fire service since May 1996. I joined the Community Fire Safety Team in around 2004. And since then, I've been part of the Fire Safety Enforcement Team. Sorry, since September 2009, I've been part of the Fire Safety Enforcement Team. Currently based at Withington Fire Station in Manchester. The team's split into two areas, technically north and south of Manchester. Withington being south, with our Manchester Central Office, with most of our team based at Manchester Central Fire Station. Next slide, please. So what do fire safety officers do? We enforce the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005. We're the regulator for fire protection once a building is occupied. We're the statutory consultee at building regulation stages. And it's fair to say, to some degree, we do pick up the pieces when it goes wrong with buildings. The Fire Safety Order doesn't apply to empty buildings, buildings in construction, or one that's occupied by illegal squatters. That's because the building would be occupied unlawfully. Therefore, those persons wouldn't be classed as a relevant person under the Fire Safety Order. I think it's fair to say that the fire service is often seen as the can-do organisation. I think when members of the public have exhausted all other avenues with respects to things like car parking on the street, litter issues, refuse, neighbourhood disputes. They can often come to the fire service at the end of that process because they think that we can help out and support. And, you know, in some cases we can, but we just can't fix a lot of the problems that people present to us. Next slide, please. We work with pretty much all of our local authority partners. Local authority, oh, you've jumped on ahead there. Local authority building control department, local authority planning department. We do a lot of work with the housing compliance team because there's a crossover of legislation whereby for a property like a HMO, housing multiple occupation, the Housing Act would certainly work better for us, which it's a better piece of legislation to enforce on as opposed to the fire safety reform order. We do a lot of licensing work, joint activity with the police, trying to disrupt criminal activity related to child sexual exploitation and modern day slavery. Because where we get these areas of non-compliance, it's likely that there will be fire safety issues related to the building stock. So it's good to do that joint piece of working. We work closely with trading standards, especially around this time of year. The seasonal explosive joint inspections, working with trading standards to do visits to check obviously compliance for the fireworks which are being stored in businesses at the moment. We work closely with hospital trusts, housing providers, and the list is endless. I mean, I wouldn't say endless, but environmental health, waste management. We do petrol site inspections, relays with representatives from Manchester Airport, Manchester University, Manchester Met University, joint inspections with North West Electricity and gas providers looking at illegal extracts. So a very varied mix of partnership working across the board. Next slide, please, Jackie. In my introduction there, I probably didn't emphasise too greatly that I'm the team lead for the Primary Authority. I picked up the Primary Authority reference at the beginning of the year, and to say it was definitely a shock to the system, to say the least. We've currently got 20 well-established partners with at least another 4 that are pending. Just where we're at, because I'm kind of took on this new team lead, we're currently reviewing our position and the current position within the guidance to support business. So we're looking at our action plans and the strategic direction that we want to take with our Primary Authority partners, because I think the whole thing just needs to be reviewed appropriately. It's probably fair to say. Okay. So looking at the legislation that we work to, it all falls under the Fire and Rescue Services Act 2004. That covers, amongst other things, our powers, the functions of fire and rescue authorities and training. We enforce the Fire Safety Order 2005, which replaced the old fire certificates. What that order does is it puts a massive onus on the business owners to look after their own fire safety provisions. The fire safety order basically states that it's no longer a thing that the fire service come down and we tell you what to do. It puts the responsibility onto the responsible person for the business for them to do a risk assessment process. The fire safety order is an amalgamation of lots of pieces of legislation that were put together to produce this kind of one-size-fits-all approach to fire safety in businesses. Under that fire safety order, fire safety inspectors have to follow what's called the Regulators Code. And amongst other things, it states that regulators should carry out their activities in a way that supports those that they regulate to comply and grow. Regulators should provide simple and straightforward ways to engage with those that they regulate and hear their views. And regulators should base their activities on risk, which I'll cover later on in the presentation. Fundamentally, what the fire safety order does is it puts certain duties on the responsible person, the main responsibility being the production of a suitable and sufficient fire risk assessment. So what that means is if your organisation employs 5 or more people, your premises are licensed, or an alterations notice is enforced, you must record the significant findings of the assessment. But we always say it's good practice to record those findings in any case. You must review your fire risk assessment to reflect any changes in your business. It's a legal requirement, and what we always say is if you're unable to do it yourself, you must appoint a competent fire risk assessment to carry out that risk assessment on your behalf. Okay, slide please. Just going to cover some of the basics of our enforcement powers, powers of enforcement. The fire safety order is broken down into a number of articles. Under Article 27 of the fire safety order, we've got the powers to enter any premises at any reasonable time, with the exception of a single private dwelling. So that's your own home, anybody's own home, that would be classed as a single private dwelling. That would allow us to carry out an inspection. It's probably fair to say that we rarely use those powers of entry because we generally rely on the goodwill of business owners to cooperate with us to allow us to carry out our activity. However, that's not to say, you know, that power of entry is there should we need it. Next slide, please. We've got 4 levels of enforcement. The first 2 are what we class as informal notification. The second 2 are more formal action. So minor notice, it's generally, there wouldn't be a follow-up required, or rather a follow-up inspection required. The way I view it is you've had the conversation with the business owner, you've discussed the fire safety issues that are relevant to the premises, and what you're doing is in that minor notification, you're just confirming essentially the conversation that you've just had. Action plan is more like a longer term fix where there are some timeframes applied to it. So that might be looking to resolve issues, for example, in a school whereby we're asking for a lot of work to be done in the school, but they won't be able to complete that work until something like the summer half term because they need that 6 weeks to get to disrupt the classes. We've used the action plans with some of the cladding replacement issues as well for some of the high-rise buildings in Manchester. Enforcement notice, this is getting serious now. An enforcement notice is a mandatory notice, at which point we're giving you timescales. There's an immediately 21 days for the appeal process, and that's from the day the notice is served, at which point if you appeal the notice, you don't agree with what's written in it, you can go through an appeal process which will create a determination at the magistrates court. But kind of a way that I view enforcement action is that as the regulators, we don't give advice that's above and beyond the minimum recommendations required. So we can't make recommendations for something that isn't needed. It's always for to rectify issues which would create a dangerous condition within a premises. The final part of our formal action is the prohibition notice. I'm sure most people have heard of a prohibition notice. That's mandatory. We have the powers to stop the use of all or part of a premises. It may lead to an investigation and ultimately a prosecution. Most prohibition notices are backed with an enforced notice, which would give you the requirements to make the building safe. So it would list out the deficiencies. It would then list out what things you are needed within the premises to make it safe and fit for purpose again. Next slide, please. So an old view, or what I like to think as an old view, the old fire bobbies, the old fire police statement that you may have heard of. Fire safety is going to cost you money. Officers may take a harsh approach for you to meet compliance within your business, and there may be a negative perception of the fire authority within the public domain. I still like to think that the fire service is seen as the good guys. We still get a lot of people, businesses and members of the public coming to us just for general guidance and advice. So as much as I think that there is a perception of us being quite authoritarian, we definitely are seen as the go-to can help type organisation. And that's the way I want it, because we are there to support business. We're not there to force people to do unnecessary work and cost people unnecessary amounts of money. That's just not what we're about. Next slide, please. So this is my view, or our view, of a modern fire and rescue service. Definitely approachable. I've spoken many times in the past where I've turned up to do a fire safety inspection and I've had people physically shaking in front of me because they're so nervous about the process, so nervous about engaging with a fire safety officer. But satisfying to know that at the end of the process, at the end of the inspection, at the end of the audit, I've had people thanking me for being so approachable and thanking me for being so helpful, and that we've actually made it quite a comfortable process. And that's what I want people to know about the fire service, is that we're not there to boss you or force you to do things that aren't necessary. Definitely compassionate. People value good advice and guidance, and people value an approachable attitude. It's definitely fair to say that we've had more interaction with the public over the last 10 years. We've just on within the community engagement, we've had a lot of things like the safe and well checks, the smoke alarm installation. I think the fire service do engage very well with people within the community, and that reflects over to the business side of it. I think we apply sensible solutions, clearly, and within which are consistent with the law and within the constraints of the guidance that we need to follow. We consider proportionate solutions and sensible solutions, because we have to be sensitive to the financial constraints of the businesses, because clearly from the 2008 recession and COVID recovery, people don't have the money to spend unnecessarily. And I think fundamentally we strive to be consistent with our regulation, because what we do is, post the inspection, we put the data that we've captured into our enforcement management model. That system determines an outcome for the inspection. So that is the benchmark for how we maintain our consistency throughout our decision-making process. I'd like to think that we've moved away from the do as I say days to, well, let's have a look at what you've got, show me what documentation and what your risk assessment looks like, and then we can make a view as to whether or not it's reasonable, or you need to make other alterations or give recommendations to provide some more fire safety provisions. Next slide, please. So why would we visit your premises? We've got a number of reasons which would prompt a fire safety visit. RBIP, or risk-based inspection programme, that's probably the biggest reason that we would turn up, or rather make contact to arrange a fire safety inspection. Buildings in the country, all buildings in the country, are categorised by risk. So hospitals, hotels, all sleeping accommodation, clearly that stands a higher risk compared to something like an office space, which is only used day to day and not used during the night time. So those higher risk buildings we aim to inspect more frequently and be perhaps a little bit more rigorous with, because the higher the life risk, clearly the higher the importance of the fire safety provisions. We might visit you because of a post incident. There may have been fire safety failings in the business, so to give advice on that and to ensure that you've got enough support to get yourselves back up and running. We'll always look to give out business continuity advice so that we can try and lessen the effects of a fire incident on the business, so that you can get back up and running in as short a time as possible. We may visit the business through intelligence-led or multi-agency work, but that would normally be through the police, or trying to disrupt the criminal activity. And probably one of the next biggest reasons for us to be at your business would be because, or rather interaction, is just general requests for fire safety advice and support. Phone calls to the fire safety team, emails to the fire safety team, or somebody contacting fire service headquarters, the contact centre there, just to ask for some advice, at which point we may or may not then arrange a fire safety inspection. It may be that we just send out some guidance and deal with it. Clearly, at the moment with COVID going on, we're trying to lessen the activity, but historically it would have just been, we could have gone out and done an inspection just to give that advice. Next slide, please. So, supporting business. I mean, this probably could have been almost an endless list, but some of the things that we've been involved in recently. The Business Safety Week, which is the initiative to support, or an opportunity for the NFCC, the National Fire Chiefs Council, supported by Fire and Rescue Services, to make small and medium-sized businesses aware of your fire safety responsibilities in the workplace. And it's a chance to let businesses know that there's help and advice available for them all year round. We do a lot of seasonal themes. There's a lot of community-based seasonal themes. So there's like home safety initiatives during winter. There's summer initiatives related to open water and barbecue safety. There's things like the Christmas markets, which we engage with business owners about, Manchester Food and Drink Festival, and local business campaigns that we deal with. COVID, clearly a massive piece of work for us at the moment. Those businesses looking to get back up and operating. We've done a school's return letter, just basically outlining what provisions they would need to look at during the return of the kids back into the school workplace. So because what a lot of businesses have done is, and schools, they've either closed off some of the exit routes or made one-way routes so that they can dictate the direction of the flow of people. That's all good and well, which would have to be a review of the risk assessment. However, I think a fundamental part of that is that all bets are off should the fire alarm sound. We can't be looking to direct pupils or people or members of the public through certain routes to alternative exits in the event of an actual fire incident. If the alarm goes off, I'd say, as normal, go to your nearest exit and, you know, evacuate the premises accordingly. I had a little bit more written into this, but I've changed what I wanted to speak about because I've looked at the NFCC guidance again, which is constantly being updated. And something, just a general reminder for business owners, is that the NFCC guidance states that there should be no wedging of fire doors because the fire doors are an important fire safety measure. It's advised that we keep fire doors closed and follow the government guidance on hand washing and cleaning hard surfaces. So trying to restrict the COVID spread through just general cleanliness as opposed to trying to wedge fire doors, which would create a fire risk. So probably, well, definitely, that's what the NFCC guidance is recommending. So, you know, out there in the business, we don't want to see fire doors being wedged because you clearly increase the risk of fire spreading from one area to another, and that's not good in a fire situation. For business owners again, due to the restrictions of COVID-19, you may have fallen behind with your maintenance and testing of fire alarms. So just make sure you get back on track with those tests, those maintenance checks that you would have ordinarily done. And it's always worth doing a review of your risk assessment. Now, as I said earlier, if you can't review the risk assessment yourself, then whoever did your risk assessment, get them back just to review it to ensure that the business is operating in as safe a manner as possible. Lastly there on that one there, post-incident reaction. Clearly, the biggest one that I could talk about there is the Grenfell Tower incident. More recently, we've had the Cube in Bolton. The fire service do a huge piece of work when it comes to trying to give public reassurance post these big incidents, because certainly in Manchester, the economic impact of students not coming back to Manchester will be absolutely drastic. Okay, next slide, please, Jackie. So advice, this is something I was going to move on to there. So advice to reduce deliberate fires. Again, post-COVID, businesses may have remained closed and might not be in a position to reopen or have changed ways of working, which may give greater risk of arson. So I'm just going to very briefly go through some key points that are again on the NFCC webpage. Most arson attacks are unplanned and they're classed as an opportunist crime. So I'll just go through some very basics of how to reduce those likely chances of an arson attack on the business. So first one, good housekeeping. Waste is a potential fuel source for fire. So just ensure that you've got good waste management systems in place and make sure that your waste management is covered in the risk assessment. Waste should be in a secure area away from the buildings. Skips, recycling containers and bins should be kept away from the building eaves and canopies. Entrances and exits should be kept clear at all times. Keep external areas clean and tidy so it's less visible for intruders, and plan ahead for your busy periods. Clearly on the run up to Christmas, you're likely to have more stock, potentially more refuse, so just manage that as best you can so that we don't have stuff spilling out of bins, which would clearly create a potential fire risk. Protect your premises. Consider having CCTV. Consider having anti-arson letterboxes. Have a clear sign in and out procedure for your staff and visitors, and always report vandalism. Because if the police don't know about it, they can't do anything to help with the problems. And involve your staff, involve and inform your staff, because your staff are your biggest asset, and the vigilant workforce will can help protect your business. Have a clear process for opening and closing the premises, and just maintain your security and ensure that staff know about fire prevention and have a process to report concerns. Okay, next slide please, Jackie. Is fire safety important? And again, sometimes it's obvious. So as you can see, top left, we've got clearly one of the exit routes blocked with produce there. The picture to the right, we've got an exit sign which has still got the security metal bar, which, you know, if it's there and it's signed up as an exit, it has to be available to be used by members of the public at any times. Roller shutters still in situ, and probably to a fire safety officer, it's obvious, but where you've got all that data cabling going through potentially what's a compartment wall, it's been backfilled with pink foam. It's very common to see that in businesses and a lot in the housing type sector, because I'm assuming there that the wall's what we class as a compartment wall, at which point a compartment wall should give us at least 60 minutes fire resistance. So it won't allow a fire to spread beyond that compartment wall for at least an hour. What they've done there is clearly they've punched a hole in it. It's been backfilled with the pink intumescent foam, but they've gone beyond the parameters of that foam use. That, as much as it looks sealed, it won't have the same effect as to if it had been used and applied appropriately. So a fire could easily breach through there and get from one area to another. So it's a clear passage for fire and the hot gases to spread to affect the business clearly more than you'd want it to. And the last picture there just shows a hinge of a or rather a damaged hinge on a fire door. Clearly things that need to be looked at. So a question that we often get asked is, you know, stuff like, I've got an exit here, do I need it? Or do I need this smoke extract system? The alarm's flashing faults all over it. Does it matter? Do I need to get an engineering? Well, yes. Usually, if those provisions are already in situ, it's not likely that they're not going to be needed. However, that's where your risk assessment process comes in. For you to tell us whether or not you need those exits, because if you want to discount a fire exit, then you'd be basing your assumptions on that you've got alternative exits for the numbers of people using the space. So in some cases, yes, you can close off an exit, but you'd have to demark it so it doesn't reflect being a fire exit. And as I said earlier, your risk assessor would do that through reviewing or evaluating how many people would be likely to be using the premises, and there will we have other exits available for them to make good their escape in the event of a fire developing. Next slide, please. So just again, this is just another picture of reviewing risk assessments, looking at housing providers. Clearly, post-Grenfell, there's been a huge emphasis now on stuff like timber balconies. So it's about reviewing stuff like timber decking, the cladding issues, safe storage of barbecues, smoking areas and storage areas for those occupants. Next slide, please. Oh, you might have to click through that because there's 3 pictures attached to it, thanks. So sometimes it's not easy to spot the fire safety provisions. We've got what these are demonstrating are poor compartmentation, poor fire stopping, and a lack of cavity barriers. So these are the physical features installed in a building to prevent a fire spreading from beyond certain areas. You can see there that there's evidence of smoke damage, there's fire coming out through a ventilation duct there. But these are things that a thorough risk assessment would have identified and certainly made recommendations on. Click through the next 2, please, Jackie. Go to the one with FRA at the top. That'll do, thanks. So I'm just going to sort of summarise now and just end the presentation with giving some pointers for fire risk assessments. There's loads of advice and guidance out there. You've got the DCLG government guides, which is Department of Communities and Local Government. You've got the GMFRS webpage for fire safety, supporting businesses. Every fire and rescue service will have a similar webpage giving fire safety advice and guidance. And I always say, if in doubt, seek professional advice. If you can't do the risk assessment yourself, then you should be looking to get somebody who's sufficiently qualified to do that on your behalf. And we always recommend that you get somebody who's got recommended by either the NFCC or the IFE, Institute of Fire Engineers. There's certainly both a good reference point for appointing an appropriate fire risk assessor. That's me done. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Oh, I've got an echo. Thanks very much, Simon. Really interesting and gave a great insight to the culture change of fire and rescue services, as with any other area of regulation. I do embarrassingly remember the reference of fire bobbies, which is a long gone term used for fire and rescue services. Obviously, I've put some points on the chat as well about the NFCC and examples that have been used by NFCC of business support from fire and rescue services through primary authority during the pandemic. So that was included in Business Safety Week earlier this month. So it was 2014 when primary authority, fire safety came into primary authority, and there was a huge increase in number of partnerships for fire safety with businesses, and 60% of fire and rescue services offer primary authority. So that business support is in high demand from fire and rescue services. So I know we've run slightly over, but I do think it was worth it. So thank you, Simon. We've got a couple of questions on the chat for you, Simon. Compared to other types of enforcement officers, obviously training standards and environmental health, do businesses see you in a more favourable light, do you think? And if so, does it make your job easier or harder?
Cool. I think it makes our job easier, to be fair, because, like I say, there are some areas in Manchester which have perhaps a negative enforcement opinion, and I can walk around these areas quite comfortable. However, and people are very welcoming with the fire service. I think they see the badge, they see the uniform, and I think, I don't know, I think we are looked at quite favourably, definitely.
And I'd agree, working in different areas of regulation and working in fire services, but well, supporting fire services the past couple of years, I've noticed that respect that you kind of It's not so much fear, but respect, I'd say, was definitely key. Anybody else got any other questions in the chat? No? Is there anything else anyone would like to raise with Simon? So, yeah, I'll add some other links into the chat to the IFE, Institute of Fire Engineers, for a reference point as well. But the NFCC website is also very good for advice. But I think the main thing that we can take away from your presentation today is that, you know, partnership working is key in the fire and rescue service, and that's well established in Greater Manchester and a number of fire and rescue services. And obviously, going forward in the current situation and business as usual, working together is key to supporting business, and that you're not scary, even though you wear the uniforms, and you anywhere near a fire bobby is not the best way to describe you. So that was really helpful, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of everyone on the call. Thank you.
There's been a lot of very kind comments being made there, so thank you all. Yeah, I hope it's been helpful, because like I say, we are there to help people, and just, yeah, use us whenever you need to. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Simon.